Welcome back to Google Developers Live at I/O. This is our last session on the evening for day one. Louis Gray here with my co-moderator Daniel Sieberg, who has returned. Thank you very much.
Happy to be here.
And Greg DeMichillie from the Cloud Platform team. He's Director of Product Management on Cloud.
Hey guys.
And Cloud has had a really solid update here at Google I/O. A lot of good information. And so we want to take this time at the end of day one to really walk through those updates and understand from you what's going on with Cloud at Google and what do people need to know?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, it was a pretty big day for us here. And when I think about what we're doing in the cloud at Google, it really comes back to the fact that, over the past 14 years at Google, we've been building this amazing infrastructure for our own use. And whether people knew it or not, when they used Maps and Gmail and Search, they've been using this incredible infrastructure. But until now, it's been something that's only available for Googlers. And now with the cloud, we're actually letting third-party developers, any developer out there, run their applications on this same world-class infrastructure. And I think that's probably the biggest, most exciting thing. About 11 months ago, we were here at Google I/O. We first launched the cloud platform, and it's been a busy 11 months since then. We launched, I think, something like 163 new features in the 11-month period, which is really phenomenal if you think about it, but that's because we get to build on top of this incredible infrastructure that already exists within Google. So I then look at and think about what we actually announced here, and there's sort of a couple big issues. I mean, the biggest one is probably Compute Engine. For those folks who know, Compute Engine is our infrastructure as a service product. It allows people to run virtual machines, running operating systems of their choice in our infrastructure. And as of today, in fact, about 40 minutes ago, it's live and open for signups for any developer. So any developer out there who wants to can go to cloud.google.com and sign up and start firing up virtual machines and playing with what we can do in the infrastructure. So that's probably the single biggest announcement. We also talked quite a bit about App Engine. And again, for people who've been using the cloud platform, they know that App Engine is a platform as a service. Basically, it allows developers to concentrate their code on the part that makes their app different, and to not write that boilerplate code that just makes sure that it scales up when I get traffic and scales down when I don't get traffic. App Engine handles all that. App Engine's been usable for Java and Python and Go, and we announced today that we're adding PHP to the mix, which we think is a pretty big move in terms of millions of developers out there who now can use App Engine without having to learn a new language. And so PHP is one of those things that comes up. Now, why PHP? Why are we doing that now? Yeah, I mean, that one's actually pretty easy. If you look at any of the statistics out there, 3/4 of the world's websites are powered in some form by PHP. So it's just incredibly widely used. And so that made it a real obvious target for us. We really wanted to take and not just build your father's PHP. So we wanted to take PHP, which people know and love, but bring to it the App Engine magic, which is lets you build websites that scale up much faster than with any other technology. And equally important, when there's no traffic, we scale everything down to zero, and you have absolutely no charge when there's no traffic. Excellent. Now, one thing I noticed, and Daniel and I were talking about it earlier, which is probably where he was going. We look in the keynote where cloud started to be part of the announcements from the other teams, and two parts in particular. One, we were looking at Android, where we talked about Google Cloud Messaging and the sheer volume of updates that are happening every single day with applications on Android. And the second piece was Google+, talking about using a Google data center as your darkroom for photos. Right. And I think what I'm hearing from them and from yourself is this real abstraction of where the data actually is and putting the data center to work. Maybe you can talk about that, about how the cloud platform is really benefiting the other platforms here at Google. It all comes back to the fact that at Google, to do the amazing things we do at Google, we've had to invent new technology. We've had to invent new data center technology. We've had to invent new file systems with things like GFS. And what people don't even understand is that's Google File System. Google File System. We've, 2002, 2004, we wrote these papers that really changed the way data centers are run. What people don't realize is at Google, we've actually already moved a generation beyond those. We actually now use even more powerful technology on our infrastructure. I think what you're seeing across Google is, whether it's in Google+, whether it's in Android or in the cloud, it's all helping customers and developers do things that they never could do before. And in the cloud platform, very few people could afford to build the kind of data centers we can. Give you one example, networking. Everybody knows how important networking is to application performance. At Google, we led a partnership that actually we are the only non-ISP to have laid submarine cable under the ocean across the Pacific Ocean. And we did that because high quality networking bandwidth is critical to our core products. And what we're doing with cloud is now other developers can just come along for the ride and get the advantages of the networking and the performance and the data centers we're doing. And I think you see that across Google, that the investments that we've made in infrastructure pay off across the whole company.
Now, for people who aren't here at I/O, they may not know that there's actually a cloud. We're part of the cloud in a sense right here because of the data sensing experiment that's going on. And in fact, there's one just below our feet right now. Talk a little bit about what that is here at I/O. What are we learning from that? What is it all about?
Yeah, this is cool. One of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to build a real world example of the cloud platform, and we wanted it to be part of Moscone Center. So all across Moscone Center, there's 525 of these little sensors. And they are running open source Arduino processors, open source software, and they're collecting data on things like the humidity and the temperature and the noise level, which is a little quieter now than it was a few minutes ago, but you can imagine when tracks are out. So we're measuring just the ambient information about the volume and the temperature, and there's pressure mats counting how many people walk by. Now you can imagine there's 525 of these collecting multiple data streams per second, and we're all funneling that into a Google Cloud Platform application. And we're collecting that data and using App Engine to ingest it. We're using Compute Engine to do some analysis for it. We're using our big data products to allow people to query it and visualize it. And if people come over to the sandbox over here, they can actually explore and visualize some of this data and see where were the popular places that people were hanging out, where and when was it really noisy. And again, this is all done in a way that when we're done, the data is all going to be turned over to the community and the tools so that people can continue to examine and look at this data. So I think it's just a really cool example of the physical world meeting the cloud platform in a way that allows developers to really see a truly large-scale application.
You mentioned big data. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot.
Sure.
You had an announcement today, which was a cloud Datastore.
Right.
Maybe you can walk us through that and help us understand how it fits with the other storage options that are
that's
out there
a great
at Google.
example. The cloud Datastore, let me back up for a second. At Google, if you think about it, we've had to build technologies with very big databases and data sets to do things like search the web. And from the beginning, we knew that SQL databases were just not going to cut it. So we've built what is probably the world's largest NoSQL data store for our own use at Google. And we had previously made that available just through App Engine. And to give you a sense of the scalability of this data store in App Engine is currently processing 4.5 trillion requests per month. Not billion, trillion requests per month. And the big news now is that data store is now not just available from App Engine, it's available from Compute Engine, or actually any place with a REST API. So any developer, no matter what programming language you're using or environment you're in, you now have access to this incredibly high performance, highly scalable data store. And we think that's also a big step forward because NoSQL databases really are at the heart of a lot of modern, highly scalable web applications. I don't think people understand when we say Google scale, what we mean. We count in trillions, not billions.
Right, and trillions, the joke would be, I've forgotten how to count that low.
Right, even Carl Sagan would call a trillion a big number, right?
Right, absolutely. You were saying what it can do for our partners. What are some interesting implementations that you've already seen with Cloud Datastore?
Yeah, so there's a couple really good examples of the cloud platform. A couple of them have been around mobile. Not surprisingly, there are a lot of people out there building mobile applications, and almost any application you immediately need to have some sort of a back end. Whether it's a game because you want to connect people together, or whether you just want to collect information about what features are being used or not, any mobile application worth its salt has a back end. So some of the examples we've seen are Fresh Planet, which is a company that makes a mobile app called Song Pop, which I don't know if you've seen. You challenge your friends, and it will play little snippets of a pop music, and it's in different categories, and the first one to identify the song wins. They currently are built on App Engine, and they're really proud to say that they have only 2 developers who build their back end of the application, despite the application scaling up and being, I think, the 5th most popular application in the store. Another one that's really popular right now for any of our viewers who are in Europe, they might know that the Eurovision Song Contest is going on right now. This is the song contest is very big in Europe, and part of it is voting on what song should be the best. What we've done is they've built the Eurovision backend on top of Compute Engine. And so they're seeing, peak loads of 50,000 requests a second, peak loads. And we're able to meet that, and 90% of those we deliver in under 24 millisecond latency. So think about that. At peak, we're delivering the vast majority of their requests in 24 milliseconds or less.
And what's interesting about that is first we're talking about big numbers with trillions.
Right.
And now we're talking about little tiny numbers like microseconds.
Yeah.
And trying to work even smaller than that.
Absolutely. One of the things that we've really tried at Google is we know that speed matters. So we've tried really hard in the cloud platform to focus on not just fast performance, but consistency. Because it's very frustrating if you're building an application and one day your data performance is just fine and the next day it seems to be slow and you can't figure out why. So it's really been sort of a hallmark of ours to think about not just raw performance, but consistency of performance as well.
Yeah. Lewis touched on big data, and I would love to hear from you on what are the sort of secrets to unlocking big data. What are companies doing to kind of make that useful and
Yeah,
because people talk about it a lot.
Yep.
But I think that a lot of people struggle with really what to do with it and what it means.
The hard part of big data really comes in a couple forms. One is just the sheer size of the data means that traditional database management tools just don't work. You need to think about the data in a different way. And clearly that's where things like NoSQL data stores, the cloud data store come in. But the other thing about big data is a lot of it is about how you aggregate different data from different sources together. It's how do I take my log data and how do I combine that with my user data and how do I combine that with my sales data and do it in a way that lets a casual business analyst actually make sense of it. And that's where things like Bigquery come in. Bigquery is our product that allows you to almost magically take these giant NoSQL databases and query them as though they were SQL. You write SQL-like queries as though it were a SQL database, but underneath it's in fact automatically sharding and it's a highly scalable NoSQL infrastructure. So I think the challenges of big data really come in multiple dimensions, but mostly it comes back to people wanting a platform that takes care of the grunt work, for lack of a better word. I mean, there's a lot of work in building out big data that's not unique to your data set. And we're really trying to take that away so that developers get to focus on the fun part, if you will, the things that make their app different rather than the things that make their app the same as somebody else.
I'm glad you mentioned Bigquery. One cool thing about Google Developers Live is we don't just start and stop at I/O. We have Google Developers Live events year-round, and we regularly have guests like Michael Manicherry from your team to go ahead and come in and talk about Bigquery. And you mentioned that it's fun, and there's something fun about seeing somebody take a big data set, be it Wikipedia, or something of that order, and running a query against it and seeing those real-time results. So I've enjoyed watching that as we've done our GDL events. And so one thing you also talked about, without getting any secrets away, I don't want Urs to come over here and get us all in trouble.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
But you talked about the uniqueness of Google, and you said sometimes we're working on the next generation of a file system or any other piece of your equipment that people haven't even thought of or caught up to yet. What is it that's unique about the Google environment that gives you access to incredible delivery?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you step back, we invented everything we invented because we had to. Like Google has big goals, right? I mean, when Google set out to say we're going to index the entire World Wide Web, that means you need to store an entire copy of the World Wide Web. And you quickly realize that normal file systems don't work for that. So you have to invent your own file system. It really is a case of us setting huge objectives, having a Gmail system where you can have 25 gigabytes of email. Well, that makes you have to invent new technology. So I think that's one part of the secret at Google is that we aim for big goals, and as part of that, that forces you to invent new computer science and invent new data centers. And the other part is we invest in our infrastructure. One of the things, Urs said this in the keynote, so I feel like I can say it. We spent $2.9 billion on infrastructure last year. That's a phenomenal amount of money, and we do that because it's so critical to our own success. We have to do it to be able to keep advancing the state of what we do. And the cloud platform, we are just really fortunate enough to be able to take these amazing things that Google develops for its own use and offer them up for other developers to use. And that's really where the magic comes in. I think it's fun to see technologies that we develop and to have us not just write a public paper about it, although we do that, we continue to publish academic papers, but to go to the next step and say, here's an academic paper, and here's a running version in Google Cloud that you can play with. I think that's pretty fun. It's pretty amazing at Google. So I really think it's the combination of there's Google big and Google scale, and we aim for that in everything we do. And then in cloud, we get to come along for the ride and invite other developers into the party. And so that's really a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. Hey, earlier we had the team on, we call it Performance Alley. The Chrome team came up and they talked about making the web faster. And one of the things that we touched on is it's an old adage that you don't really solve a bottleneck, you just move it somewhere else.
Yes.
And you continue to find out whether it's a computation or it's a server or it's the network or it's the cloud. And it seems like with the cloud platform and a lot of the work we're doing here at Google, we abstract a lot of that away from the developer, so the developer doesn't have to worry anymore. How do you start that kind of analysis and chase that bottleneck so it continues to move and becomes less of an issue?
Well, no, you're absolutely right. Every time you make one area faster, you now have, there's always one area that's at the top of the stack, that the area you want to work on most, right? And that's the fun, that as you nail one area, then the bar just keeps being raised higher. And I think that's, that notion of constantly chasing the next performance metric is really important. In Compute Engine, for example, we are, as part of the signups, we demonstrated, spinning up 1,000 VMs, or it was a couple hundred VMs, don't want to oversell. And our VMs are currently starting up in the range of 20 to 30 seconds to start up in a VM. When we talk to customers, they say, oh, that's amazing, that's phenomenal. But we look at that and go, okay, that's fine, but that's not really where we want to be. And the reason is we really want to change the way people work. An example of that, one of the things we announced today that I really think is going to change the way people think about cloud applications is this may sound mundane, but it's around billing. Today with almost every cloud provider, your time is measured in hours. So if you make a 15-minute compute job, you pay for an hour. It's sort of like, if I made a phone call for 15 minutes and the phone company charged me for an hour, right? That wouldn't be right. Well, because our VMs start up so fast, we actually charge by the minute. There's a 10-minute minimum, but then after that, you only pay for the actual minutes you use. And we think this really kind of changes the way people think about problems. You can start to throw cores at a problem, if you will. Like, why not double the number of cores and make the job take 20 minutes instead of 40 minutes? Because now I can do that, and it's cost effective to do that. So, we think the performance, the sub-hour billing is going to open up a lot of new ways for people to use computing. So that's probably, in the non-product area, one of the things I think is most interesting, and we're getting a lot of good response for. But you couldn't do that if we didn't nail the startup time and make the performance really fast, right? Yeah. So, but you're right. So doing performance in one area then opens up new possibilities in others.
I know we're running out of time, but I would love if you could address the idea of information security, which is obviously something I'm sure that you think about a lot. But in terms of the ISO standard that's applied to managing data and all of that, I think that's absolutely worth talking about.
So obviously, at Google, it's critically important that we have information security is just a core part of everything we do. But what customers want is they want some external validation of that. And the ISO standard 27001 is that. They come through and they audit your physical security of your data centers, your logical security, your access control privileges. They can come in and do audits at various points in times. And so we have now completed the ISO 27000 certification on App Engine, Compute Engine, and Cloud Storage. And one of the things we've heard from particularly some of the larger customers is that it's a confidence sign. And we're going to continue to do more certifications as time goes forward, because we think they're a good way of demonstrating how how important security is and how seriously we take it at Google. But you're right, it's foundational to the whole notion of doing cloud computing. So I was really happy that we did that. And again, stepping back, it's another example where we have to invest in security for our own purposes anyway, for Google, right? And again, then the external developers can just take advantage of that. So yeah, and I was glad that we got that and we were able to announce that today.
That's great.
I'm glad you were able to join us. I really appreciate you waiting to do the last slot of day one.
No problem. I'm in between the attendees and I think like food and drink, so I appreciate the chance to be here.
It's been really exciting to talk about cloud platform. I mean, the kind of scale that we have at Google is really tremendous. I'm really glad to see that we're really taking that to the development community. One thing we do at GDL is we talk to our developers every day throughout the year in their language, in their time zone, from a location that makes sense. We're really excited to do that at I/O.
Yeah, and encourage developers to try it out and give us feedback. We have product forums, we have pre-release forums, we have issue trackers. We want to hear. The PHP is a classic example. PHP was partly driven by the fact we had direct feedback from users saying we want this. So we want to hear from people about what's the next thing that they would like to see us do.
Right. Great. Well, thank you so much. Daniel Sieberg and I will be back here tomorrow morning. I'm really looking forward to that. We kick off our GDL at I/O broadcasting even before the sessions kick off tomorrow from 9 to 10 a.m. What we're going to be doing is showcasing a lot of the work you did in the sandboxes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was doing for the better part of this afternoon, was wandering around to different sandboxes. YouTube, we talked to some folks about Drive, Google+, and of course Maps. So we're going to bring all of that to you tomorrow.
Absolutely. So we're going to run through those sandbox partners, and we have a really special treat. We're going to have Bradley Horowitz from Google+ to do a deep dive around lunchtime tomorrow for those of you on the Pacific side. So we welcome you coming back and talking GDL at I/O. In the meantime, subscribe to Google Developers on YouTube. You won't miss a single thing from us throughout the year. And check us out at developers.google.com/live. We'll see you tomorrow morning.